Okay, so today we're going to be diving into something you sent our way,
Right, yeah.
a match prediction report
Yeah.
for Nottingham Forest
Mhm.
and Everton.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you reached out because you really wanted to get a solid understanding of
Yeah.
what the data suggests about this game.
Yeah, and it's a great report. It covers a lot of different stuff, like not just, a single prediction, but it's
Yeah.
got a lot of different, you know, ways of looking at it. So you got like the probabilities for, Nottingham Forest to win a draw or
Yeah.
Everton to win. But then it's also got a bunch of simulations, like thousands of matches simulated,
Oh, wow.
and estimates for, expected goals,
Oh, cool.
even a breakdown of the most likely score lines.
Okay, so it's a pretty in-depth,
Yeah,
a
that
comprehensive report.
comprehensive, yeah.
All right, well, let's break it down then.
Yeah.
We want to, cut through the statistical noise here
Yeah.
and give you the clear, actionable insights without getting lost in all the numbers.
Absolutely.
But where should we even start with this thing?
Well, I mean, I think a good place to start is just with the core prediction itself, right?
Okay.
So what does the main statistical model suggest is going to be the outcome?
Right.
And this one uses what they call a stacked model.
Okay.
So basically, it's like, think of it like a panel of experts.
Okay.
You've got a bunch of different statistical models that look at the game in slightly different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of combine all of their predictions to give you one.
Oh, so it's like a consensus.
Yeah, a consensus, a more robust kind of forecast. And according to this stacked model, Nottingham Forest are actually considered the slight favorites.
Okay.
They have a 44.96% chance of winning.
So just under 45%, so not a huge...
Not a runaway prediction or anything,
Right,
but
okay.
still slightly
Right.
in their favor.
And what about a draw?
Yeah, so a draw is actually pretty significant here.
Okay.
It's got a probability of 32.70%.
Oh, wow. That's
Wow.
higher than I would thought.
It is, yeah, it's a big chunk of the possible outcomes.
Yeah.
You're looking at, almost a third,
Right,
like
yeah.
the potential outcomes there.
Okay. And that's obviously a lot higher than what it's giving for an Everton win, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So Everton's win probability
Mm-hmm.
is actually the lowest of the three.
Mm-hmm.
It's only 22.34%.
Okay.
So at least according to this stacked model,
Mm-hmm.
they're seen as the least likely to pull off a victory.
All right, so the data seems to be giving Forrest a bit of an edge.
Yeah.
But, a draw is still very possible.
Absolutely.
Now, the report also mentions these confidence intervals.
Yeah.
What are those all about?
So confidence intervals are basically a way of saying,
Right.
okay, so we have these probabilities, right?
Right.
But they're not like set in stone.
Right.
It's not a 100% guaranteed thing.
Yeah, of course.
So the confidence interval gives you kind of like a range of plausible values for where the actual probability might fall.
Gotcha.
So for example, for Nottingham Forest win, the report says the confidence interval is between 37.89% and 52.04%.
So that's pretty
Yeah, that's a fairly wide range,
wide, yeah.
which means there's a bit of uncertainty there.
Mm.
For a draw, it's a bit narrower, 26.02% to 39.37%.
Okay.
And then for an Everton win, it's actually the widest. It was from 16.42% to 28.26%.
Oh, wow. So
So that basically
means
means,
it's really wide.
yeah, that's the one the model is least certain about.
Mm-hmm.
The wider the range, the less confident it is about that outcome.
Makes sense. The more unsure it is, the
The
bigger the range.
the bigger the net they have to cast. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so one thing that I noticed in the report is that even though Forrest is the favorite,
Right.
it says no bet recommended.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, why is that?
So it comes down to this idea of value
Okay.
in betting, right? So the report says that the odds for a Nottingham Forest win are about 2.05.
Mm-hmm.
And even though their win probability is, roughly 45%,
Yeah.
those odds aren't actually good enough
Okay.
to make it a statistically sound bet.
And why is that?
So they're using something called the Kelly criterion.
The Kelly criterion?
Yeah, have you heard of that?
I don't think so.
So basically it's like
Okay.
a guide for how much to bet
Oh, okay.
based on the odds and your estimated probability.
So it's like a risk management.
Yeah, exactly. It helps you manage your risk
Okay.
and maximize your long-term growth in betting.
Interesting.
So in this case, even though the model likes Forest, the Kelly criterion says those odds just aren't juicy enough.
Gotcha. So it's saying the market isn't really
Yeah,
valuing that win probability appropriately.
exactly.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So moving on then.
Sure.
The report talks about these Monte Carlo simulations,
Yeah.
which sounds very fancy. Yet.
So basically what they do is they run the match thousands of times,
Oh, wow.
like in a computer simulation.
So you're like simulating
Yeah.
all the different.
Every possible outcome.
Yeah.
And each simulation incorporates all those probabilities we've been talking about.
Right.
And it just lets you see.
So it's like running all these what if scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. What if this happened? What if that happened? And then you can see, okay, out of all these thousands of simulations,
Yeah.
how many times does each team win?
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that the results of these simulations
Mm-hmm.
are super close to those probabilities from the stacked model.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like in the simulations, Forrest won about 45.40% of the time.
Okay.
Draws happened 32.52%.
Uh-huh.
And Everton only won 22.08%.
So really, really close
Right,
to
yeah.
what the stacked model was predicting.
Yeah, so that kind of gives us more confidence.
It does. Yeah, it seems like.
Right. Like it's not just one method that's
Yeah.
pointing in this direction.
Yeah.
It's like multiple things.
Right, right. Multiple ways of looking at it.
Exactly. And they're all coming up with similar numbers.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So now there's this other thing called Poisson regression, which is for expected goals. What is that all about?
So Poisson regression, it sounds complicated,
It does, yeah.
but it's basically a way to estimate
Okay.
how many goals each team is likely to score.
Okay.
So it takes into account things like their past performance,
Yeah.
how many goals they've scored historically,
Okay.
how good their opponent's defense is, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So in this game, what are those expected goals?
So for Nottingham Forest,
Yeah.
they're expected to score about 1.60,
Okay.
and Everton's expected goals are much lower, only about 0.90.
Oh, wow. So that's almost
Yeah.
almost
Something to
any.
say
Almost half. Yeah.
for Forest,
Yeah.
and so that kind of explains why
Right, because
the favorite.
if they're more likely to score,
Yeah,
then they're more likely to win.
right, exactly. Okay, so
Makes sense.
we've looked at the probabilities.
Yeah.
We've looked at how confident we are in them.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at, whether we should bet or not.
Right.
We've simulated thousands of matches. We've done it all.
We've looked at expected goals.
Yeah.
Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
What are the most likely score lines?
Yeah, so the report actually lists out the most probable scores
Okay.
based on all this data.
Mhm.
And at the top of the list
Okay.
is a Nottingham Forest 1-0 victory,
Okay.
which has a probability of 16.3%.
So a close game.
Yeah, one goal.
But for Forest win.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the other ones?
So next up, you've got Forest winning 2-0.
Okay.
That's at 14.8%.
Okay.
And then a 2-1 victory for Forest is at 13.2%.
So the top three are all Forest wins.
Yeah.
Huh. But what about that high probability of a draw?
Yeah, right. So that does come into play.
Okay.
The fourth most likely score is a 1-1 draw
Okay.
at 12.7%.
All right.
And then after that, you've got a 0-0 draw at 7.9%.
Okay.
And then finally, the most likely Everton win is a 1-0 victory for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only at 6.7%.
So pretty far down the list.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So it seems like, while Forest wins are more likely,
Right.
a draw is still definitely on the table.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is
Yeah.
the report mentions this thing called cross-validation accuracy.
Right.
What is that, and what does it tell us about?
Okay, so cross-validation accuracy is basically a way to see
Okay.
how well these models have actually performed in the past.
Oh, okay.
So it's like,
So we can kind of gauge
yeah, exactly.
how accurate they are.
Because, if a model's been really bad at predicting games in the past,
Right.
you're probably not going to trust it as much.
Right, of course.
So cross-validation is a way to kind of test that.
Okay. And what are we seeing here in terms of the accuracy?
So the average accuracy across all the models
Mm-hmm.
is somewhere between 52% and 56%,
Okay.
which means, they're getting it right.
So a little over half the time?
A little over half, yeah.
And
the report even gives some specific examples. So like the random forest model had an accuracy of 56.32%.
Okay.
And the bagging ensemble model was at 55.79%.
So these are pretty,
Sophisticated.
sophisticated models.
Yeah.
But they're still only getting it right
Yeah.
a little over half the time.
It just goes to show how unpredictable
Yeah.
football is.
It really is.
Even with all this data,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of chance involved.
It's a good reminder that, you can't just look at one
Yeah.
number and be like, okay, that's definitely going to happen.
You got to look at the whole picture.
You got to look at the whole picture. All right, so let's wrap this up then.
Okay.
Let's do our executive summary. What are the key takeaways?
Okay. So basically, It looks like Nottingham Forest are the slight favorites,
Okay.
but there's a really good chance of a draw.
Mm.
So it's probably going to be a pretty close match.
Okay.
And even though Forest is favored, the betting odds aren't good enough
Right.
to actually recommend a bet.
Based on the Kelly criterion.
Based on the Kelly criterion, yeah.
Okay.
The most likely score is a 1-0 win for Forest.
Mm-hmm.
But, other scores are possible too.
Right. 2-0, 2-1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2-0, 2-1, even a 1-1 draw.
Right. Okay. So to summarize for you, our listener,
Yeah.
the data is suggesting a tight game.
Yep.
Forest has a slight edge, but a draw is very much a possibility.
Absolutely.
And don't go betting just because they're the favorite.
Not worth it.
Not worth it.
You're not going to get a good return.
Find some value out there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you a much clearer understanding of what these models are saying about the Forest-Everton game.
I hope so.
We've covered, a lot of ground here.
A lot.
From the basic probabilities to the, really specific details about goals and scores.
All the nuances.
Yeah. It's really cool to see how this data can be used to
Yeah.
give us insights into the game.
It's a powerful tool.
Even though it can't predict the future exactly.
Of course not, no.
So with all that said, thinking about that slight Forest advantage in goals, but also that significant chance of a draw,
Yeah,
what do you think is going to be the deciding factor in this match?
that's a good question.
It's going to tip the scales one way or the other.
I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean,
It's a good question to think about, right?
it is, yeah.
Because, we've got all this data,
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, it's still football.
right. And anything can happen.
Anything can happen. That's why we watch.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.